You've eaten Gotham's wealth, its spirit, but your feast is nearly over.
This is not my home. It's an operating table. And I'm the surgeon. Why aren't you laughing?
From this moment on, none of you are safe.
Welcome to the Batman Book Club, a podcast exploring the Dark Knight Library. I'm your host, Ryan Lauer. Batman Book Club is a proud member of the Batman Podcast Network, hosted by Batman on Film. Just go to batmanonfilm.com, click on podcasts, and you'll find the Batman Podcast Network that has a whole list of other Bat-related shows that also like to dive into other nerdy subjects that we all, including Peter Vera, love to frolic about in our free time. Batman Book Club is also on Patreon. Make sure to go to patreon.com/thebatmanbc to help support the show, keep the generators running here in the Wayne Manor study. And also make sure you stick around to the end of this episode where I will talk about the giveaway currently going on now for the Batman Book Club. Now, thank you for listening to episode 160, The Dark Knight. Wait, this episode is not the Batman Movie Club. It's the Batman Book Club. So how are we going to talk about the Dark Knight? Well, fortunately, I have another Ryan here that is going to do that with me, and we're going to dedicate this episode to Paul Herman and Peter Vera because they thought it can't be done. You've heard his voice on here many a times. He's a lost Mario brother. It's one Sir Ryan Haas. Ryan Haas, welcome back to the Batman Book Club.
Hello. I am jazzed to be here, especially with in a different format here. It's not every day that the Batman Book Club actually feels like a true non-comic book club where we get to talk about a book, a novel.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. How many times have we actually done a novel on the show? You've done
once,
which is Batman Forever with
Batman Forever with
Rob
the great
Myers.
Rob Myers. Yes.
All right.
Yeah, so you are
good.
the second. Nobody chooses there are Batman written word stories. I've actually talked to another friend that you've heard heard his voice on this show many a times. That he and I are going to dive into something similar to this too. So maybe this will open up some avenues because there's some really good written word Batman stories that I think a lot of people have not discovered.
I've shown you, we've talked lately, like, oh yeah, I mean, earlier this year, I was like, there's a novel for the Batman 66 movie that I just didn't know about until like this year.
The great Jay Oz, he told me about that, I believe, the last time he was on this show, and I had no idea that they did it. It's not Batman 66 or Batman the movie, the novelization. It's like, I forget what it's called, but yeah, you have a copy.
It is. It's just I've got it back on my novel shelf. It's Batman versus the Fearsome Foursome, I think is what they called it, but it is a novelization of the movie.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess we just kind of gave it away there. What we're doing is we're celebrating 15 years of The Dark Knight by talking about the novelization of The Dark Knight. Now, this Haas, the only novelization that I've read of Batman movies is Batman Forever that I covered way back, like episode 12 or 13 for the 25 years of Batman Forever with Rob Myers. And then this. I actually have never read any of the other novelizations. And I've got Batman Begins on the shelf. Yeah, we got to keep going.
We do got to keep going.
Batman Returns. Wait. Actually, on my own accord, when I bought this, I actually bought the Batman and Robin one, and I read it last month. And
there you go.
It's right on par with the movie. Surprisingly, there really isn't too much different.
Most of them are, Like
that's what I felt.
We've talked about this before. I'm a big lover and collector of Batman novels, especially the ones that are based on anime or in any of the films.
Mhm.
And I've read almost all of them, but I have not read the Mask of the Phantasm novel. So that might be a good one
Sir,
to get. What?
you didn't know this, but we'll talk about that one because it's 25 years. No, it's 30 years this Christmas.
Oh, 1993. Yes. Ooh, that'd be a
And I
good
mean, you've
Christmas.
kind of become an adaptation guest on this show. You
Yes.
did the
I
comic
love
adaptation of 89, comic
it.
adaptation of Returns.
Yes.
This.
I've been saying, like, I feel like I'm one of the more eclectic guests. Like whenever I'm on, it's usually something
You're a
that's
wild
not a
card.
comic book or even the comic books themselves. Yeah.
Mhm.
Or am I a Joker?
You are
You
a
know,
Joker.
because I
Yep.
keep in our 50, what was it? Episode was it? I don't remember if it was episode 50 or episode 100 on this where we did our
50.
so like what my top pick was that I mentioned was like wasn't a book or anything. It was the comic strip, the
Yeah.
1989-90 comic strip, and it's kind of related to this because it's super underrated and super hard to read, but if you do, it's a super I keep using that word. It's a very rewarding story because it also is very Harvey Dent, Batman, Gordon
Mhm.
trio centric. I would love to cover that at some point. But it doesn't really make sense until it's maybe available more
Yeah.
widely so people can read it. But I do I would love the day when that comic strip is a newspaper strip is more widely available, and then we can
Mhm.
have an episode of
That'd be great.
we could turn this show into the Batman strip club.
Well, it'll be a special video podcast.
Yep. Welcome
YouTube
to the
views
Batman
will
strip club.
spike. Yeah. Pete will be all about that one. He'll be like, sure, I'll throw like yeah. So for this one, because there's no comic adaptation of The Dark Knight. This is the first
There's a
time for
little
this show.
bitty one. I think it was what for like a cereal tie-in or some sort of food tie-in where like the prologue was adapted. I forget for what.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah.
I do have
Yeah.
the little figures that came in cereal where Joker has like his hands up like this, little plastic, and his little leg kicks up. And then there's a Batman one too.
Yeah.
So maybe it came in that, but I don't know why I wouldn't have the little comic with it.
DVD. There was a DVD special edition that came with the prologue.
Yeah, I bought that. Batman Begins. They re-released.
I'm looking it up online.
But
It looks like it came with like the Walmart Batman Begins Blu-ray gift set. It has a Dark Knight prologue comic.
well, that's
Yeah.
annoying. I thought I had that. Okay, I'm gonna have to search eBay. All right, thanks, eBay. But they did have a novelization, and so I'm like, okay, great. There's a way because The Dark Knight. I actually just got to talk about the movie with Bill for Batman on Film to talk about 15 years, and this is not only my favorite Batman movie, it's my favorite movie, period. And I'm like, what's a way to talk about it on the show? And it's like, oh, there's literally a book called The Dark Knight, and it's the novelization written by the great Denny O'Neil, who also wrote for Batman Begins, and then he also did the one for The Dark Knight Rises, correct?
No,
he didn't do Dark Knight Rises. I thought he did.
He did Begins and The Dark Knight, and did not do The Dark Knight Rises.
Okay.
Which is curious, and I always wonder why that didn't happen. And I did ask him about this when I got to interview him a few years ago, and he was under the impression like, oh, they never did one, because if they did, they would have asked me. But they did, and
you're like, I'm not gonna push back.
Yeah,
on this.
it's not worth bringing it up here. I'm glad
Nope.
I didn't, but I don't know why they did. And I think let me grab it off the shelf right here.
It's right there. Why even go to Google? Haas has it.
Yeah, Greg Cox, and boy, it's a big boy.
Yeah, that's a thick one.
It's like, so by comparison, the Dark Knight novel is 292 pages. Dark Knight Rises is
485. I'm kidding.
413.
Wow.
So it's a big old book.
Yeah.
And I remember all three. So like, and Denny O'Neil, I'm also obviously a big fan of. I think a good chunk of the things that I pick for the show are written by Dennis O'Neil. he did the comic adaptation scripts for the Burt Schumacher movies, as we know.
Oh yeah.
So
Look
he's
at that.
has a pedigree of adapting Dark Knight
Yeah.
film stuff, and I think that probably comes from his time as the head editor of the Batman books at the time, and then he'd written other novels too, so it's right up his wheelhouse. And then for the Batman 89 novelization, he did some uncredited editorial work on it too, and I think we found that out in some of the back issue magazine stuff around the time we were talking, because like when they had like a final draft of the Batman 89 novel, and around the time when the movie adjusted the third act in the cathedral, the novel had to be amended to reflect those changes. And so they weren't able to get the original author on short notice, and Denny O'Neil jumped in there and helped whip that book into shape. And when you read the book, I remember it feels like kind of rushed, and kind of the end isn't as strong as the beginning, kind of thing.
Gotcha.
But by the time the Batman Begins and the Dark Knight came out, Denny was retired, and feels like this was like a really good thing to keep him going during his retirement years, from what I remember talking to him about these.
That's cool.
So
And it just kind of feels like with the influence of some of that O'Neill and Adams stuff too on the Dark Knight trilogy, and with Nolan and Goyer, that it just kind of makes sense that
it makes perfect sense.
would be the one.
That era and him reinventing Batman into the dark, serious character, and then the Joker's Five-Way Revenge, reinventing the Joker, plus being a co-creator of Ra's al Ghul, it makes perfect sense. And it's really cool that he was able to have the opportunity to be able to be the person to do the novelizations of at least the first two movies. And I remember all three novels being pretty good, but the Dark Knight one maybe being my least favorite of the three. And I don't know if that had anything to do. But rereading it, I don't know. It makes me want to reread all three at this point.
So initially, I was hoping that I could do that. I was going to read Begins and then read this, and then I would read the Rises afterward. But I mean, for whatever reason, I decided to just read Batman and Robin, and then it became like, oh, okay, I can't read Begins and then read Dark Knight in time, so I just got to go to Dark Knight. But
reading the Dark Knight novel, initial thoughts at the beginning of the show here, I think it might be a pretty cool reading order to do the Dark Knight, Batman Begins, Dark Knight Rises.
All right,
which
I'll
we
take
can
up that
kinda get
experiment.
into. Yeah.
So obviously this came out in 2008, the same year as the movie. My guess, given Christopher Nolan being who he is and everything, that this book didn't come out until after the movie did. But I don't know the date that it came out specifically. But I mean, it came out in 2008. Like we said, written by Denny O'Neil. I don't know that there's any other version other than like the mass market trade paperback.
I haven't
of this
seen any other version.
Yeah, as much as I looked, this is all that I saw. There isn't even really a clear picture of the book available online either. If anything, it's like a really small picture that you try to expand it and it gets blurry. Because I was trying to figure out like how to do some fun show art or something for this, and there's all the pictures are just low quality. But so obviously Haas and I both have the mass trade paperback version. Haas, when did you first read this?
So I'm a film novelization junkie. I got all three Dark Knight trilogy novels as soon as I could upon release, and read them upon release. I want to say that I read Rises twice, because famously I love that movie to death. So but Begins and Dark Knight, I think I've only read once until now, where I've now reread. This is the first time I've reread the Dark Knight novelization since my first reading when it first came out in 2008.
Gotcha. This was my first reading, as probably it's not surprising to you, maybe surprising to others for how much I love the movie, but it's just, if I'm in the mood for it, I just always watch the movie. But this was a great motivation.
That's usually what you do,
to read the book. Because also I'm very much that way too, of if there's, I like to use the Hunger Games almost as an example. of, and it's funny because not like around that time too, Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. I was reading that book leading up to the movie, and then watching the movie, I was waiting for stuff from the book to happen, and then it didn't, and then it skipped over it, and then I was like, wait, isn't this where? And that's where my mind went. So for Hunger Games was a thing of like
with novelizations.
I was like, I'm gonna just watch the movie, then read the book. And it was like I felt, and then in other movies based on books, when I've done that, I found of like I enjoy the movie, and then the book is an expansion. And it works, and it's fleshed out, and I'm visualizing what's on screen. So by reading The Dark Knight, that was a total strength of this. But what was really like my initial thoughts too is just it was kind of surprising to me how much, which it only makes sense for how many times I've seen this movie, and this is the first time I'm reading the book. But maybe that helps since we're going to talk about the book of oh wait, that's not how they said it. I can hear the inflection of the voice here. Oh, this is kind of cool. So this could be right before that. Like I could, just because I know the movie so well, I could visualize with the book so much. But also, what really stood out to me was how much the directing and the acting is like so crucial to the movie compared to like the book.
Yeah,
because the book, I'm not going to say it didn't feel flat, but it is just like.
There's a lot of moments. So like
cinematic moments of like that's what you needed to elevate it, basically.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things where like if you didn't see the movie, you wouldn't know how much you're missing when you're reading through the book. Yeah. And your mind would have filled in the gaps in its own way in a different spot, like in the book. But that's the good thing is like I think most of the time you're reading a novelization, it's probably assumed that you've probably seen the movie. So you're just trying to read the book to kind of get a different take on it or from a different angle. So maybe the book doesn't have to do as much of the heavy lifting from that perspective.
It's also so funny to me too, because, you know, the ideas behind it and stuff of like, well, why do you need to make this book then? It's not like this is original material and now they turned it into a movie. So let's slap the movie poster on the book, but sell the same book. It's like, no. This is based on the movie, but it is, I don't know. It is interesting. And then you have somebody, you know, very credible in Denny O'Neil of adding some elements. And I don't think that there's anything, and we'll get to, you know, asking and your thoughts on this, but there isn't anything crucial in this book that stood out to me of like, oh damn it, that should have been in the movie. I think most of the differences are just in snippets of dialogue, plus or minus some, but here's a little bit of backstory. I don't know how they could have done this in Nolan's way and not just been exposition dump. And then like I don't know. I don't think that it had any of those moments. Whereas I know the Batman Forever novelization was like that was based on the Red Diary cut.
It's got a lot of
totally different.
Yeah,
like so different, and that was really cool because it was like, okay, this does feel. I can visualize this being like, oh, I feel like this is much more mature. This is very different. Batman and Robin, the book felt like the movie. Like which just kind of almost just guaranteed of like, no, I think like it just wasn't good, period.
Well, no, it's usually, I mean, the book's like, if it doesn't veer much from the movie, that usually says that like there's not a big difference between the script and what ended up on the page. And that's generally true for the Dark Knight novelization, although like I know you've been posting a lot of like Dark Knight like remembrances and articles and things on your Batman Book Club Twitter. The Dark Knight the movie is a freight train of a movie. Like it doesn't stop once it starts going. A really cool thing about the novel is that it does kind of take its time. Like I would say like the first third of the book is largely the stuff that is not that Dennis O'Neil got to do more kind of freeform, like which is my favorite part of the book because it's not like the movie. it's like you get like I took notes on all the chapters, like the first, like you get like a non-linear Batman Begins recap, you get extra context for Bruce's early years, and it frames the boundaries of his skill set. Like you get a lot of extra Ra's al Ghul additions that are missing from the film. It does a really good job of recapping things if you haven't seen Batman Begins or haven't seen Batman Begins in a while. But how, you know, you watch Dark Knight the film and it doesn't link back explicitly to Begins as much as Rises does, and it was really cool to see how much of the Begins stuff found its way back into the Dark Knight novelization through all this early stuff, because you get more Scarecrow backstory. And
I was going to say, you get the link of Scarecrow, what happened after he rode off that horse, like, and Begins.
You
finds a patient who saves him, basically. It's like, let's go to my uncle's garage, and that's where Scarecrow builds himself up again. And it's like, if you want now, you can read that, and when you watch the movie, you can fill in those gaps.
It fits in perfectly, and
you're like, okay, that black SUV or the van that he's
stuff
in,
that you would never like. It maintain like you've got the surprise in the movie, like, oh, it's the Scarecrow, but if you already know that when you read the book, it's stuff that the movie just couldn't stop to do. But I love being able to have these asides where you get to be like, oh, let's go into Jonathan Crane's mind for a second, and O'Neill really kind of does delve into the backstory and the psyche of who that version of Jonathan Crane is, and it totally works. And I loved being able to fill those gaps, picking up from Begins and establishing where he is in the Dark Knight and why Batman, and like it's all a result of the escalation, you know, of what Batman's done is where all that ends up.
So I mean, 25 pages in the book until you get to the bank heist, which, as we all know, opens the movie.
Chapter 4, you don't even
of 292 pages, page 147 is when Lau is delivered at GCPD with the note. So right. I was kind of surprised by that. I'm literally halfway
runtime on the movie,
before, like, when Lau, like, what, 30 minutes, 35 minutes of the movie, and then even with the chase,
like if you take
Harvey,
the runtime, like the whole third act of the movie is probably contained within the last
20 maybe pages.
It goes by quick.
So I think that's what was really surprising to me too, is I'm reading along and I wasn't impatient or anything either. I'm just kind of like, wow, this is really taking up, fleshing out everything in the book compared to the movie, because the movie is, as Nolan's even said too, like, basically it's a machine. Like, you're in it and you're just freaking going until the end. And the book just definitely fleshes some of that stuff out, and it gives you, and like, so some of the things that it does have in the book that I did, like, I kind of appreciate it. You already mentioned like a Begins kind of recap. I did like the Scarecrow little bit part and how it's funny. He follows a patient, which I also mentioned. I mean, Alfred in the penthouse, like, they've been in the penthouse for a month. So, you know, this is like picking up like right after Begins, and Bruce is practicing and doing kata, I think it's called. Bruce is a playboy, living up more of the playboy persona. He talks with Rachel about being Batman, and one thing that I really loved that it just cuts to out of nowhere is the Joker's behind an old woman at a bus stop. And
it's the first time you see him in the book. He gets mentioned in the book at all. And
it plays a whole, and I read something that O'Neill added this because he thought, like, this is perfect Joker, and it lives up to what I know O'Neill said before about Joker. And it's, the wording of it is like, bus is coming, Joker's behind the old lady.
He's excited.
Doesn't push her.
You think he's going to push her.
And then he gives her $100 bill. And it's like, yep, that's fun. I'm not saying that needed to be in the movie or anything like that. It's like, but that's
it's the kind of thing you can do in the novel to kind of set up what kind of character this is going to be. That's in chapter 3. And that's when I had a lot of notes on too. Like, because this is like the perfect book for Dennis O'Neill adapting. It takes so many of the concepts and ideas that he kind of helped pioneer back in the day and distilled into kind of a different format here. Like, And I think this is the first time where I've really kind of been able to notice that Rachel Dawes, in a lot of ways, is kind of a cipher for Dennis O'Neill's Leslie Tompkins in a lot of ways. Because Leslie Tompkins is very much like pragmatic, and she's like, she supports Batman but wants him to try to choose non-violence as much as possible. You know, like I wrote down here, like Rachel saying like he using violence to solve enormously complex problems. It echoes O'Neill's use of Leslie Tompkins. And then it also kind of like Rachel straight up in that chapter, like she tells Bruce to stop being Batman. Like it foreshadows her fate, but it also kind of postulates like what could happen to Bruce if he fails. And that there's a lot of like Rises foreshadowing in that chapter too, that I was like, oh wow, like he figured it out like before Rises was even a thought at that point. Like it's interesting how
gave
well it
the
connects.
idea to Nolan of Rises.
Right, yeah, probably. I mean,
give it credit.
So I think to me, like I'm pretty sure. So this is the first time I've read the book since Rises has been released. So I'm seeing a lot of the connections in this book, and of course, it's a testament to how well the trilogy itself wound up. But it's really cool to be able to see additional connections there, like reading the book when you get
that it plays as one story.
Yeah.
Let's see, what else do I got? I mean, I can hear because the Chechen's accent, of course, and it's the build up to that opening scene with him, and how in the book and how he says to like one of his goons tells him like there's this doctor, his name's Jonathan Crane. He's like, name sounds like Sissy, and he's like, no, but he goes by Scarecrow, Sissy from a Halloween Party. Like that made me giggle. Moving a little further, let's see here. I do like, and we didn't need to spend more time because the movie, as like The Dark Knight as it is and moving, credits start at like the 2 hour and 24 mark or something like that. So it's like I didn't no more needed to be added, but it does play up a little bit more, which I do like, of Bruce really questioning like there's no way that Harvey Dent is as pure and good.
There's a couple of chapters here, right? And that's like the movie itself. It just kind of runs with like, yeah, Dent's a good dude. Like there's nothing more that you need to figure out than that. And, a lot of comic book interpretations go in a few different ways. Like, oh, he was abused as a kid, or there were, or there's things under the surface that kind of bubble up and stuff. And that's not really where the movie took it, but the book made me think like, are they going to add more in the book for that? Because like in chapter 11, you get a lot of chapter 11 and 12 is where you a lot of extra Harvey Dent backstory that's not in the movie, where they talk about like how his parents had like a suspicious like double suicide kind of thing, and it makes me think like, oh, are we going to find out later like Harvey like snapped, like did Harvey do it? And they even kind of mentioned that like in the book, like Bruce is like investigating him and he's like, maybe Harvey was responsible, but no, he's got a rock solid alibi. And I wondered if like, oh, maybe it'll come up later in the book, and it doesn't. So like ultimately it just proves like, like the book kind of makes you question it, but no, like it doesn't really go back and dispute that. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I like that, and how, I mean, Bruce even says basically like that's how he and Harvey are the same, split right in the center. But like, of dying young, and or their parents dying young as they were kids, and I mean the effects of like corrupt GCPD and the effects on Harvey's life as well. And then his dad was a corrupt policeman, but then it was a murder suicide from like all of that. And then the more that he digs in, and then he even creates, not Matches Malone, Charles Malone.
Exactly. Yeah.
Good old Chuck.
Like to follow him like investigating Dent. Like that was a really cool thing. And the book makes point to make extra connections there of like how he really is kind of like a white knight. Like his trajectory and story follows Bruce's a lot. Like especially that's probably why O'Neill added the extra part in, like, oh, he also had parents that died, and kind of got thrown through the system, and this is the path that he chose versus Bruce's.
Mhm.
So it really does like pit them more as equals. And so that was like it's interesting because it really makes that connection more impactful in the early stages of the book, where Bruce is realizing, oh, this is not my out as Batman, but this is the way that the city needs to be saved. And even so, Harvey, the book gives Harvey that same realization too, of like one I put like on page 122 is one of the things I noted, where towards the bottom, Harvey even thinks about like, this is where the ultimate plan is going to go, like where he's being asked like how, he wants to clean up Gotham, and like, what happens to Batman when you're finished? And Harvey even says, I wish I had an answer. I'd like to believe Batman would survive. Maybe he'll just go away and never be seen or heard from again, but we all take our chances. And I'm like, whoa, that's just what happens in Rises, for like a time. If their plan
I
succeeded,
didn't think about that.
Their plan succeeded to a point. Batman went
wasn't needed
away.
anymore.
Batman wasn't needed anymore. He was never seen or heard from again. Like, that's what happens. That leads up to Rises. And I was like, whoa, what a cool foreshadowing that,
That's cool.
that did come to pass. Yeah.
Um,
And it makes me wonder, like,
related
was that like dialogue that was in the script or a deleted scene that they didn't really need, or was that something that O'Neill came up with? Because either way, that's super fascinating. Like, whichever the case was for that piece of dialogue.
From complete fan service, so we know from the movie in the interrogation scene when Joker even says for a moment I really thought you were dead.
Mm-hmm.
And it's brought up at the dinner between Bruce and the ballerina, and then Harvey and Rachel, and the ballerina says, the Harvey Dent is the Caped Crusader.
Mm-hmm.
We got at the end of the fundraiser, one of the images from that amazing viral marketing campaign. One of the rewards was the picture of Heath's Joker, and you can see he's in like the back seat of something, and he's
in the
he's
getaway
almost got
car
like
after throwing Rachel off the roof.
Joker debut comic. It makes me think of that with like the fingers up sort of deal as he's sitting like that.
Yep.
That scene is in the book. It's in the script book as well, but there's more added here as far as dialogue of after Batman saves Rachel from that building, and a black SUV drives by, and then it cuts inside of that is Joker. And he wipes blood off of his chin, licked it, and said, "Yummy. Did you see that? Did you love it? A great big bunch. I tossed the lovely bird into the wind and out bats went. I wonder, would the bats take a header for everyone? Or is that pretty little birdie someone special? Either way, we know one thing for sure now. Batman will always try to save the innocent, and that will be his downfall." And then the driver asks, "What about Dent?" And he goes, "Oh, I'm a man of my word."
Right.
The script had, "What about Dent?" "Oh, I'm a man of my word." But everything before that feels almost a little 70s, little hokey
kind of
Joker dialogue to me, to where I'm like, I always wondered what that scene was, because they released an image of Joker in that.
Yeah.
But we never got it.
It feels like the point of that scene was a tag that shows that, oh, the Joker's mind is turning. This is where he figures out like that he's going to use Rachel in some sort of his next part of his plan. And it makes sense that they removed that from the movie, because nowhere else do you really see the Joker's wheels turning in terms of like what his next move is going to be. It always just seemingly happens, and he's one step ahead. And there you kind of would see the Joker not necessarily being one step ahead. And it keeps the mystique a little bit more.
It's like, how could I don't see Heath's Joker saying all of that.
Right.
So in that regard, I'm kind of like, yeah, I'm good with it not being there. Me, of course, I wondered. I was like, oh, but what is that scene? Because there's an image of Heath's Joker and we don't know what it is.
Yeah.
But we still got an end result, and I don't think it needed, in the end, I don't think it needed fleshed out to plant the seed then at that point. of like,
Right.
I'm thinking, I wonder. And then that's why he takes Rachel and or anything like that. But I mean, it pending, because there is like, gives Batman his, he's a hero if he jumps out, he doesn't just let one person fall, but then now he
Right.
just left a madman and his thugs in this party with a ton of other people.
Right.
So I don't know, that's almost like the biggest takeaway from reading this was that little part right there, because I was like,
Yeah.
that's interesting, because
Yeah.
I can visualize that image like right away.
Mm-hmm.
Continuing on, we do obviously a ruby the size of the tangerine was in the book, thank God,
Yep.
because I could hear that one.
Yeah.
You get some Coleman Reese backstory, which
Mm-hmm.
don't need it in the movie. It was completely fine reading it here. Didn't bug me at
Yeah.
all.
It was a couple paragraphs. It was good
Mhm.
enough to give him motivation for what he ends up doing in the film. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's see here. Some others. Bruce has a dream with Thomas Wayne, the doctor,
Oh yeah.
and it's kind of like a warning. I don't know how you translate that without really slowing down the movie.
Yeah.
You know?
I liked it in the book though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a
Yeah.
good. It was like it was a warning, and then becomes like a almost like a, not a callback, but later on, Bruce has this like holy shit moment. Like, this is what my dream, my dad was warning me about, was I'm
Yeah.
crossing a line now. Like,
Right.
ends aren't justifying the means here. I'm
Right.
crossing a line.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really cool addition
Where
for
it
the
all
book.
culminates when he has to choose between Harvey and Rachel. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Rachel, we see her writing the letter, and then we do see her get abducted. I don't think you can get the abduction scene in the movie without revealing that it's Ramirez.
Right. Right.
Because
Yeah.
here they even word it of she is someone that
Yeah.
Rachel knows.
It's a girl.
Well,
Yeah.
there's only
Yeah.
one
But
female officer that we know
it's
in the
cool
movie.
to see. It's cool to see that side of it in the book.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that, like I like the fact that we got a little bit more into Rachel's mind space for when she wrote the letter versus the movie where she just shows up with the letter already done. Like, this is something that the novel can do that the movie can't, where
Yeah.
I do feel like in the book you feel a little bit more pull from Rachel towards Bruce, or the conflict there. You get more inside of her head of like even later on when, like, I love the way that the book, this is a lot of the stuff in the book really surprised me of how well it was able to do more than just get the script on the page. Like, the book does a really good job of that tension from the film in the countdown scene where like Harvey or Rachel's gonna die, where they do, and like you get like the countdown, there's a minute left, here's what's happening, here's 20 seconds left, here's what's happening, 5, 4, 3. So I thought that was done really well.
Yep, I wrote that down too, that I can visualize it.
Yeah.
Where the earlier version of Loeb, Cirillo, and then Joker invading the party in the penthouse it is written of this happens with Loeb, then this happens to Cirillo, then the penthouse. And I'm like,
right.
You don't get I'm glad in the movie it's intercut, but then it's written intercut, just like in the movie for the countdown. But yeah, written really well. And I don't know, I was like, yeah, this is good. Good stuff, Denny O'Neil.
Yeah.
Rachel's last words were, Bruce, Harvey, I love you.
Yep.
I like in the movie that she is cut off mid-word, mid-sentence, because it is so much shocking and really ended. That really gave you a big thrill.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know that there's really. I'm kind of just going through my notes here, but I don't know if there really is anything that really stands out of like drastically different. I mean, maybe a big one is when Maroney gets in his car at the end, Harvey's in the front sitting next to the driver as opposed to sitting in the back next to Maroney.
Yeah, that wasn't huge. There's little bitty things like really that. No, there's not a lot of big things. And a lot of it feels like maybe little changes to make it read better.
Yeah,
describe it better on the page versus on the film. You can just show things visually faster, which is just smart. Like, it's smart little changes to make it read better in print.
Yep, I agree.
I mean, the biggest things after that, for me, were things like you get a little bit you get a little bit of like Lucius Fox's headspace with the decision to do the sonar stuff or not. And then
I'm glad you brought that up before we move
yeah.
on from that one, because I always thought this, probably not in the first viewing or second viewing of the movie, but afterward, when Batman finds out the clowns are the hostages, Lucius,
Yeah,
Lucius,
yeah,
the clowns
yeah.
are hostages. It's
Yep.
kind of like, okay, and
Yeah.
and in the book, he's tell Gordon,
Yeah,
tell
I
Gordon the
love
clowns are
that. I was like,
hostages.
oh,
And
that's kind of a
yeah,
plot hole.
yeah, I
Well,
love that too.
he like tells Lucius to tell Gordon, and then it makes sense that doesn't get translated because Gordon's gone. Because of Dent. I
Lucius
mean, it's
can't get
clear in the
through to
movie,
him.
but Lucius, he's like, well, I can't get through to Gordon for some reason, so that's why Batman's got to jump and act really quick
Yeah.
to fix everything.
So, I
Although
mean,
then in the book you don't get the Lucius and Batman using the sonar together to through that scene. It doesn't really
true.
give you that. Like you say, like, oh, at the beginning of the scene, you're like, oh, Batman uses sonar, and then that's the only little mention you get of it, and then just the scene plays out like without that banter, but back and forth.
Yeah. So I interrupted you. You were going on, but you touched on Lucius with that, and it was a complete like, yep, that actually jumped out to me right away in
Yeah.
reading this. It's like, there we go. Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe added just in the film of the intercut, like the almost like the jumping montage at the end of the movie. You don't get the moment. I love the moment when he says some people deserve to have their faith rewarded, and you get Lucius
Yeah, I
his
wrote
10
that down
seconds,
too.
and you
That like,
don't get that in the book. And I'm like, but I love that moment in the movie.
yeah. So like it's kind of a you trade one thing, get another for the end. Like on page 284, you get a really cool paragraph in the middle where you get Batman's like state of mind before he confronts Two-Face and Gordon. So you kind of, which is a cool, like, this is right between the joke wrapping up with the Joker and getting to Two-Face. Like you get that, and then that call, you get a callback to that in the epilogue before. And I love the way that it's like laid out, where like on page 291 you get to see like Batman's, you get a little bit into Batman's headspace of like what he's thinking before he rides off as like the Dark Knight. You get like, because it has this really poignant way it's written where it says like, Batman might be able to reach somewhere he could rest, allow himself a few moments peace before his long nightmare began. It just really, he had failed to save Harvey Dent, had failed to save Rachel. Like it really puts into perspective like the Empire Strikes Back type ending where like he kind of failed at everything, but like there's a success there that's just beneath the surface, but at what cost? So you get that. Although like when I read it, I'm like, oh, but we didn't get Batman's monologue from the movie. We don't get Lucius Fox's you don't see, in the movie you see him like type his name in and like Batman had a plan for this and the thing really did destroy it. You don't get that. It kind of
Alfred
really
burning
ends
the letter.
Exactly. Alfred burning the letter, like that's huge. That's a huge thing. And that's just not there because the book just kind of barrels towards the end once you get to some of that stuff. And that's something that Nolan does so well at the ends of his movies is the culmination, and you see like 20 things happening within like a minute, and you don't get that breathing room in the book. It just kind of ends. Like you get the important stuff, right? But like knowing how important some of these other threads are, it would have been nice to have a little bit more. Like it feels like the epilogue needs an epilogue, which is tough. But you obviously get the important part with Gordon's speech, and A Dark Knight is the last words of the book. So that's pretty effective, of course.
When you said between when he got stabbed in the side by Joker at the fight at the end, that's blocked in the movie. That's when he like throws him. But we still get the end result of like, hey, Bruce took a bad fall. That's why he's limping and struggling to get to the bat pod. So it's a good like, well, we were just replaced here. I do think because that paragraph too of of like how this wound was not superficial. He needed help. And then they doubled down on it and saying about the blood and his staggering and his dizziness and stuff like that. And I'm like,
yeah,
I mean, Nolan's not like ultra. I know there's like violence in his movies, but it's not like bloody violence or anything like that. But I
yeah,
think like I can picture that too, and that adding like more to Batman's heroism of even through all that, he's still
yeah,
going
yeah,
sort of deal. But I mean, we still got the point. At that
yeah,
moment in the movie, we didn't need it to just, all right, let's take a breath here and really slow down and just watch him bleed as he struggles and gets dizzy. It's like, no, we got it. And then when he fell and he's running to the pod, we got it. Okay.
yeah.
I mean, I don't, do you have anything else written down that you want to bring up? Like I said, I have a lot of stuff written down as far as like dialogue, but I mean, we're not going to go through and be like, hey, instead of he said, hey, and
that's
instead
the big
of
stuff.
Joker walking up to Lau in the book, he says, time to take a little ride. And I'm like, actually, less is more. I love in the movie, hello there.
Yeah.
Like, that's it. You're like, you're screwed, dude. That's all we need to know.
Yeah.
You're done for.
Yeah.
Gordon sobs after he realizes that it was Rachel dying. I don't think we necessarily needed that either. So, I mean, it's just, in no way or any of this, it's just like, oh, different mediums. This was better read than seen, I think, and stuff like that. So this did create a little remixing on the favorites portion, because I have some favorites questions to ask you, Mr. Haas. First off, this doesn't necessarily mean that this is your favorite part of the movie. It's reading this book. What was your favorite part?
That is just the first third of the book, where it's all not the Dark Knight, because it's one of those things where you read it because it felt new, it felt worthy of the expansion, the aggressive expansion.
Ha, you got it. You beat me to it.
Like I love the Batman Begins recap and diving into Bruce's psyche and his training, and it gave more context for Batman Begins, like how long he was being trained. And I like the stuff where he was it goes back even further, where Bruce is like younger and stuff like that. I liked all that stuff, and I liked the Scarecrow connections and this extra Rachel setup, where she tries to lay out the crux between like where she's at and where Batman thinks they're at, or where Bruce thinks they're at in their relationship. Like, so all that stuff I appreciated the most reading the book. Like, it fleshed it out in a really positive way.
My favorite scene of the movie is the interrogation scene. Reading it, I always struggled, because I was like, is this my favorite, or is it Joker in the hospital with Harvey? And I'm like, the words are great in the interrogation scene, but I think it's the performance that totally elevates it to the level that I put it at. Whereas the hospital scene, just reading the words, I think are heavier, and the point being made, but just by reading the dialogue, that I don't need to necessarily need the performance to reinforce that. So it's like, I think I give the slightest edge of the book is reading his exchange with Harvey in the hospital. Because it's so well done, of like, is that the Joker being actually for once completely sincere, or is he just playing his cards like almost the best?
Yes, that's what it is in my opinion.
And he's the Joker. You don't know.
You don't know.
I think it could be either one. I think you're justified in picking either one.
Yeah, like I'm glad that O'Neill. I mean, he's Dennis O'Neill. He understood the assignment. The things he added were great adds, and I'm glad that he didn't embellish, or like, he left the Joker in the Dark Knight as is. Like, he didn't. The only little thing he added was that one thing about the $100 bill, which was pitch perfect. And like, he didn't go, like, the Joker is very matter of fact. He did not go anywhere like in like the Joker's like thought process, or like, there's no extra insight into the Joker's mind, which I think was the right call.
Mhm.
Yeah.
These are gonna be fun. So, what is something in the book that you were glad was not in the movie?
Something in the book that I'm glad was not in the movie.
And that doesn't mean that you didn't like it in the book. It's just like, nope, I'm good with this in the book, and then
The
it's not in the
Scarecrow
movie.
stuff, the Scarecrow
Yeah.
chapters, like I didn't need to see the Scarecrow being led into a place and forming his little drug empire and stuff like that. Like that would have brought the movie to a halt. But I'm like, it would have been, you could have take that whole couple chapters and it would have made a perfect like anime extra addition to like the Gotham Knights
That's yeah.
like thing. I would
Nice.
love to see that. You know, that would be great. Like as
Yeah.
its own little side story, which was awesome to have, which is like a in the novel. Like that's what you want in the novels, stuff like that. And then once I got to that part, I'm like, oh, I completely forgot that this was in the book. And that's why I was like, when in my head I was like, oh, The Dark Knight's my least favorite of the three because there's not stuff like that in it. Like
Yeah.
in my head it was more like it was just the script on page, but I completely revised my opinion. Like it's a fantastic addition because you got way more of that stuff than I remembered. But yeah,
Yeah.
that would be the part that I would pick.
I think mine is, I think the bulk of the first chapter is just a rehash of Begins.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't need it because you've got the movie.
Yeah, that probably, I totally agree with you on the Scarecrow stuff. I like that little tale and everything. I don't need to see it, but the Begins stuff even more so, because most of the time when I watch The Dark Knight, I just watched Begins.
Right.
But
it's cool in the book because it's like, yeah, Batman, like it gets you in the mood.
Yeah,
like
yeah,
know?
of course. Like, I remember this, but I don't have to save you.
Yeah.
Oh, look at
exactly.
that. He's doing karate, not in the garage. He's doing it in the penthouse.
Well, and I think the book very deliberately sets that up to where it's like you've got Batman in kind of a choice at the beginning where he's like, oh, Batman's got the power. I've got the power to save this guy. Do I? Yes or no? Where like later in the movie, like he doesn't, you know, he's got to make a choice and he's going to fail in some regard either way.
No.
Yeah.
Now, some related flip side, what's something in the book that you would have liked to have seen in the movie?
There's little things. The biggest thing for me would be what we see in chapter 3, where Rachel lays things out more for Batman, like where she tells him to stop being Batman. It just ups the stakes for him later, thinking like, oh yeah, if I stop being Batman, it puts Batman on a timer where he's like, yeah, but like it puts that in his head where like, yeah, if I stop being Batman, I can be with Rachel. How do I do that? You know, I like that. And there's extra little things like the thing we talked about, how Batman tries to get word back to Gordon on what's going on. Like that would have been a cool little ad. There's another little thing here where Maroni is investigating the Joker.
Yeah.
Trying to figure that. We forgot to talk about that when Maroni is investigating the Joker, trying to figure out who the hell he is, and which is cool because like in that pencil trick scene, Maroni's like, oh, he's a nobody, who cares? But then later on you see, oh, he does care. He's trying to investigate him, and like his investigator guy gets like poisoned, and it's not super clear where it's just poison or if it's Joker venom.
At first, for some reason, I thought that Maroni was like, I had a guy investigate the Joker. He didn't have anything, so I'm done with him. And Maroni poisoned him, and then I was like, wait, that doesn't add up. The guy's laughing uncontrollably until he just stops, and I'm like,
so that would have been cool. So there's that, and then the other thing was like I wrote it down here. No. Boy, I'm missing my notes here. Oh yeah, in the Dent fundraiser, in chapter 17, it makes it clear that once Cirillo and Loeb dies, the party itself people start like the party kind of ends.
Oh yeah,
people at the party are aware of what's going on and they're like kind of freaking out.
Alfred turns on the TV.
Yeah, so like I thought that was a cool addition because you don't really get that. It all happens really quick, all at the same time in the movie, which is cool. but I did like how that because later on you get up more that like you feel like the city itself is reacting to the things that are happening. So I felt like that could have been a cool ad where like it like rising the tension even more, where like, oh crap, what's going to happen?
There's a couple different times that even that, you know, Bruce, like he calls Gordon more so, you know, and like that's one too where he calls Gordon, and then you describe O'Neill describes like how he's changing his voice, and then it's just like Loeb and Cirillo, you know, getting confirmation on that. And he calls him another time about because there's a scene added too of where he just takes out some regular thugs, and I think he calls Gordon and tells him where they're at and or something like that, and then he just goes home early and calls it a night. And but what you're more pointing toward is like, that could be like an earlier setting up of like seeing panic from citizens.
Yes.
Before the massive panic from the citizens.
Exactly.
So that's nice. I struggle with this one a little bit too, and both of them would come with a caveat. I want Joker SUV scene, but not all that extra dialogue that O'Neill included here, because it doesn't feel like that's Ledger's Joker.
Maybe that scene, but a different scene. Like something there.
And then I do love I don't know how you do it with the woman in the bus stop. And maybe the $100 bill, the punchline of that is she looks at the $100 bill and it's like the ones they gave in the marketing campaign where it's like a Joker face is drawn on the face of the president. Like, maybe something like that. And then it's like, what? And you don't necessarily see him, but I don't know how you do. So that's me changing the scene to want to see the scene. But I feel like that would make it fit the movie in itself. More so. Yeah. Any final thoughts here, Mr. Haas? On the Dark Knight novelization.
Yeah, like it's my final thoughts here is it's a very worthwhile read, written by the master himself about a masterful script and screenplay and movie. Like you don't really get better than that. It was refreshing to be reminded reading this that this novel is more than just the screenplay embellished on film. Like at some point it gets there. But as a whole, it's a really good retelling and enhancement of what that story is on film, and it uses the novel format to kind of drive that point home. Like it's really well done. Especially when I compare it to some of the other Batman film novels. Like it's better than most, and it's better than like the Burton Schumacher ones, you know.
Sure.
Probably the Batman Forever is the best one out of those four because it had the most to say outside of what the movies themselves were, and this one does a good job of that too. The Dark Knight as a movie doesn't really leave much room for expansion.
Aggressive expansion.
It doesn't. It really doesn't.
It doesn't. It's tight.
Begins and Rises have more, from what I remember, but I was impressed with how much O'Neill was able to expand from that story in this novel. And it's cool because like he kind of lets the once he gets past that first third, like he lets the movie kind of speak for itself, but he also kind of gets to do his own thing at the beginning. So and I think that was a really good approach, because once you get into the meat of the movie, you don't really want to slow it down with because it is like a freight train. And just as Nolan describes, and once it gets once it gets going, it doesn't stop. And so it's cool. It's like he added stuff where it made the most sense. Yeah,
agreed. I think that's like that's the best way that I could have probably put it is how you said. And the stuff that is different outside of the dialogue, it's like it not being in the movie. Like, I know we're talking about a movie that I said is my favorite, so I'm not going to find anything like, wait, this could have been in there. That movie sucks. It's I don't know. It's a fun read. It's worth it. I mean, this book I found it $4. Easy to leave. So I find it, I don't know. I think it's worth anybody to just read it once, because there's some fun expanded stuff on there that I think you can get a kick out of. Not something you have to read a ton of times. Just read it once, entertain yourself.
And it's a quick read too, by the way.
Yep.
Like it's once you get going, it's pretty. You know, I read it in a weekend. Like it's a pretty good.
That's why I was surprised. I texted you that. Like, I've sat down
And,
twice and I'm halfway through.
Yeah, and there's
It's-
some Batman novels that it's like, oh man, they're a little hard to get through. But this one, like, I'm reading it, and it's one of those. It's kind of funny. It's like I remember many points reading this. I was like, oh, this is awesome. I'm loving reading. Like, I love being in the world of this Batman story written by,
the master.
Denny's
Genuinely.
taking care of us. Like, you
Yep.
read this book if you're a Batman fan, and I felt that, and it's like, it's a
Yeah.
good place to be. And I'm like really raring to go. Like, I want to read Begins and then Rises after this, and I think it'll be a really good little trilogy here.
Perfect way for me to add a little extra something after I watched the movie on its 15th anniversary.
Right. Beep, beep, beep.
Mr. Ross, thanks for reading a 292-page novel. So you can
My
come
goodness.
on the Batman Book Club.
Yes.
Appreciate it. Could you please just inform the people, plug away, whatever you'd like?
Oh, just listen to me, I guess, on any on this show, and then any of the myriad of podcasts.
Just listen to me, I guess.
Yeah. There's lots of shows going on right now on the Batman on Film podcast feed. I'm on many of those. And just follow me on Twitter, while Twitter is still existing, at SMB_Ryan, and my Super Mario Brothers the Movie Archive website, SMBmovie.com, and and just SMB Movie on Twitter. And that's where I am.
Booyah! As for the Batman Book Club, you can follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at the Batman BC for latest episode drops, upcoming episodes, and giveaways. So right now, when you hear this, go to the Batman Book Club Twitter page at the Batman BC, because there's currently a giveaway for 2 items that are pictured. One is the Theory 11, the Dark Knight trilogy playing cards. A very cool, like, they went above and beyond on this deck of cards in the nod to the Dark Knight trilogy. Each movie's represented well. They're very cool cards. If anybody's ever seen these, like, they've touched on other pop culture franchises and stuff, they do, like, it's just done really, really well. So it was about time that it got the Batman treatment, and yeah, they're not disappointing. So follow the instructions on the giveaway for your chance to win that, in addition to a Lego Batman keychain, but specifically the 1989 Batman. Go to at the Batman BC on Twitter, and you can find out your ways to enter the contest to win these 2 awesome Batman items. Also, make sure that you subscribe to, just on your own, not for the giveaway. Just go to YouTube and subscribe to the Batman Book Club YouTube channel, because Pete and I, that Italian, we're going to dive into No Man's Land Omnibus here really soon. So make sure to check that out. And also, if you want to hear us talk about the road to No Man's Land, all 1,200 pages of that omnibus, just dip into the archives and you can hear us chat about that a little bit. If you want to support the show, there's a variety of ways you can do it. Number one, like I said at the top of the show, patreon.com/thebatmanbc. 2, tpublic.com, and type in TBBC for the Batman Book Club, where you can get merchandise with the Batman Book Club logo, created by the wonderfully talented Justin Kowalski, on t-shirts, hoodies, notebooks, stickers, anything like that. Onesies for your little ones. But if you want to support the show and you don't want to spend any money at all, that's 100% a-okay. The easiest, most impactful, and quickest thing you can do is rate and review the show. So wherever you listen to this show, whatever podcast supporter, so Apple, Spotify, Google Play, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, wherever, just go to the rate and review page and rate and review the show, because the more reviews the show gets, the more it helps spread the word. And as we all know, the word is panic. So for Ryan Haas, I am Ryan Lauer. Thank you for listening to us talk about the Dark Knight novelization on this movie's 15th anniversary. And until next time, be my Batman comics.